Alrighty, everybody. It is currently Friday, August 29th, 2025, and I'm coming at you live from a puddle of garbage juice that formed behind a dumpster that is shared with a Popeyes and a 7-Eleven. that's that's where I'm coming from this episode. And I'm also coming from a place of I don't know, annoyance, confusion. I don't know what you want to call it, but this episode, I think the title of this episode will make it clear what the theme is, but the theme of this episode is I don't think people understand Gen Z fully. I don't think they understand why we are the way we are. Because I recently, or not recently, I found an article uh from, I think it was the New York Post, or maybe I don't fucking know what it was, but it was some news article about like why isn't Gen Z having fun? And I was like, okay, I expected it to be like some boomer shit, written by like some 70-year-old man who fucking went to Woodstock and married a fucking incredibly hot chick and bought a house for $15. I expected it to be written by a guy like that. It wasn't. It was written by someone who claimed to be Gen Z. And so I was like, oh, I started off the article and it was like, hey, I just got to start off this article by saying I'm Gen Z. And I was like, they might do it, dude. They might hit the nail on the head. They didn't. They did. They did what you think a boomer would do, dude. Oldest trick in the damn book. They hit us with that. They hit us with the it's that damn phone. They that's that's what they came up with for why isn't Gen Z having fun? And the reason they came up with was it's that damn phone. Um, which, hey, that's a classic move. You know what I mean? That's like Joel Embiid's jab step, or the LeBron "la fuck you" three, where he kind of like shimmies a little bit and then hits that three. You know what I'm talking about? That's that's the equivalent of it's that damn phone, or it's like the Ben Roethlisberger pump fake. Like it's a go-to. It's a classic for, I guess, for everybody. I really thought it was only something that like older people said, but this was from a person that claimed to be Gen Z, but I feel like some of the millennials are claiming Gen Z now. I feel like everyone has called them lame for so long. I mean, and been coming from all directions. The boomers shit on the millennials, which that's the funniest thing. The funniest thing is the boomers shitting on the millennials because for the most part, the boomers are the ones who made the millennials. They're like, who the fuck raised you morons? And it's like, you guys did. They're literally shitting on their own children, which, I mean, once again, I'm not a big fan of the boomers. Uh, I like the farm boomers, like I've said, the ones that grew up like the greatest generation did, but I mean, they're so funny. You cannot deny that it's hilarious that the boomers are like shitting on their own children, being like, you fucking idiots, you can't do anything right. And not like criticism. It's not criticism at all. It's not complex enough. It doesn't really even address the issues enough to be criticism. It's literally just like shitting on you, right? Like when you watch a movie and you go, that movie fucking sucked, that shit was awful, everyone, and it sucked, you're shitting on that movie, right? But when you really dismantle it and you're like, I didn't like, the acting wasn't very good and the story wasn't very well paced, that's a criticism. You know what I mean? It's shitting on something versus criticizing something. And the boomers just absolutely fucking shit on the millennials, and it's so fucking funny. It's it's hilarious to watch them do that. So the millennials, they've been getting hate from behind and from in front of them too, in terms of like the generations. You know what I mean? Because Gen Z went ham on them. Gen Z really, in Gen Z's, I would say that's something that like they're kind of good at, or I guess we're kind of good at. But I'm gonna try to say they're. You know what I mean? Because I don't know. I don't want to get too emotionally invested in it, so I'm going to refer to them as they. But that's something that they're very good at, is just picking a target and like relentlessly attacking it. They're not it's not like a sustainable attack. It doesn't go on for very long, but when they find one, dude, they can really hone in on it and just like destroy it. Or not even destroy it, just throw a high volume of fire at it. You know what I mean? Just like, yeah, we're not hitting it with like a nuke or anything, but they are just like peppering it right the fuck up. So the millennials have really gotten it from both sides. I don't remember exactly what I was talking about I was talking about the millennials. I don't know. Oh yeah, the millennials stealing Gen Z valor. That's what it was. They're just coming in because they got it done dirty, dude. From the time that they were in like college, basically, they've been getting shit on by the boomers, and then finally, the boomers started to die off and get dementia and stuff like that. So they were like, finally, the hate's gonna end. And then Gen Z fucking toddled out of our bedrooms and figured out how to use an iPad, and they started shitting on fucking the millennials too. So I do understand why the millennials are stealing Gen Z valor. I would be doing the same thing. I would be like, yeah, I'm technically a millennial, but I'm more of like I was kind of born on the cusp of Gen Z and millennial, and it's like, bitch, you are 38 years old and you're wearing fucking Uggs. It- or not 38, but like you're 30 years old and you're wearing Uggs. You're a millennial. I hate to break it to you. You know what I mean? If you were a big fan of Hamilton, you're a millennial. That's I don't care what year you were born in. If you had like the soundtrack to Hamilton and you thought Lin-Manuel Miranda was a genius, you are a millennial. You have embodied that spirit. You've allowed it to infest yourself, your mind, your body, your soul. The millennial spirit has taken you over like a demon out of hell, possessing you to to go on Twitter and use a bunch of hashtags and praise Lin-Manuel Miranda. Um, so yeah, it's just they are stealing the valor, and I get why, dude. You know what I mean? It's like being a Jew in Nazi Germany, being like, no, I'm not Jewish. I am not. My great grandfather, he was actually Jew. No, dude, you can't. And that actually, funnily enough, is one of the other groups that Gen Z's been hating on. They went after the millennials a little bit. Now they're going after the Jays. And look, hey, I, I'm not. I would say I'm a member. I would say that is that is one of the major Gen Z, just generational trends that I've contributed to a fair bit. If you've ever listened to this podcast, I've contributed I've contributed to it a fair bit. But yeah, not really the Jays as much as Israel. A lot of them are going after the Jays as a whole because it is such a small group. The Jays are such a small group that it's like if you attack Israel, and Israel also like connects itself to every Jew on the planet, right? Like if you're Jewish, you can, or even if you just say you're Jewish, you're getting a free trip to Israel, or you can get citizenship to Israel if you're just like, yeah, I'm Jewish. So that is kind of, I don't know, an explanation as to why it's not just hate on like a country or whatever. It's hate directed towards the ethnicity. I'm not saying it's good or whatever, but that's just an explanation why, right? Like there's no other country that's like that, or there's no other country that's like that. Where it's like your ethnicity is so closely tied to this country, right? Like I'm German and British and just a general American like white mutt. My my ethnicity, it's not tied at all to the British government. But if you're Jewish, by the way the Israeli government talks, your ethnicity is tied to them, even if you don't believe it is. The way they talk about it, yes, it is. So yeah, the Gen Z's just been going after a lot of people. You know what I mean? They're just angry, and I think that's like the actual reason why Gen Z isn't having any fun. Like everyone's like, it's the phones, and the article that I read was like, it's almost like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a noise? It was like that type of thing, but with phones. It was like if you didn't like record your night out and take a bunch of pictures of doing it and shit like that, it's like, did it even happen? And it's like, I don't know. Look, I didn't get a phone until I was like in high school, right? So like I don't know. I don't really have as much of the phone culture as other people in Gen Z do, right? Like I don't have an Instagram. I don't think there's a public picture of me that I know of that exists out there. I don't know. I'm sure there's like my grandpa posted a picture of me on Facebook or some shit like that, but to my knowledge, there is no pictures of me on the internet. Maybe a couple here and there, but I really don't think there is. Maybe I was in a group photo with like, yeah, no, I went to prom with my friends, so I don't know if any of them posted to Instagram, the group photo that we took. Maybe then, but yeah, like I don't think it's that either, right? Like them being like, oh, well, Gen Z is so obsessed with their phones and like documenting everything that they do that if they go out or there's no point to going out if they can't, use their phones to take pictures and all that shit. And it's like, I don't know how true that is, man. I I don't know. I've been out with my friends before. I've been, to bars and shit like that. I don't drink, but like I've been in those places. I don't think it's as extreme as people think it is. There are people like that, right? There are people that like need to have 1,000 pictures of them doing something in order for them to, I don't know, think it exists or whatever. I don't know exactly how it works. Maybe it's like babies. If you look, it's like why babies like playing peekaboo is because when you cover your face up, the baby no longer thinks you exist, right? They're like, well, that guy's not fucking there anymore because his face, I can't see his face, right? That's how peekaboo works with babies. So maybe there is people out there that if they don't take 1,000 pictures of them at, a concert or whatever, then they don't think they went to that concert. And there is a lot of stupid people. You know, there's a lot of people that I've met that are dumb enough for me to think that's true, but I don't think it's true. And I don't think it's a generational thing either because you go you go anywhere, man. You're seeing boomers taking 1,000 pictures of them, 1,000 blurry selfies in front of the in front of wherever they are. And same with the millennials, same with Gen X, same with everyone else. They're all taking pictures. So I don't think that's the generational thing that's causing Gen Z to not go out and have fun and shit like that. And the other reason was that I heard about was like, well, they just don't have enough money. And it's like, but that's also not it's kind of true, but it's not true at the same time, and I'll explain why. Most of Gen Z does have the money to, go out to a club or, go to a bar or whatever. They have enough money to do that. But the reason they don't is because we I'll just say we because I'm speaking from experience here. We kind of grew up in a world where it was like, you got to save that fucking money, dude. We, for all the hatred we have of Jews, for all the anti-Semitism, which it's not anti-Semitism. That's the funny thing about people calling Jewish hate anti-Semitism. Jewish people aren't Semites. It's it's one of the funniest things in the world to me that they call anti-Jewish rhetoric anti-Semitism because it's like they're not Semites. That's not that would be like being like I'm a Semite, right? Because the argument for Jews being Semites is like, well, they descended from people from the Middle East and they practice a Middle Eastern religion. And it's like, well, most people in Europe descended from people who lived, actually almost everyone in Europe, really almost everyone in the entire world, aside from people like sub-Saharan Africans and like Khoisan people, everyone descended from people from the Middle East, right? Because they all had to go through the Middle East and the Near East to be able to get to, Europe and Asia and North America and South America and all that stuff. And Australia, I guess. Can't forget those boys. So everyone descended from people from the Middle East. And Christianity is the most popular religion in the world, right? And that's a Semitic religion because it's from the Middle East and it, follows that direct line of like Abraham and Noah and all that fucking bullshit. So it is, I don't know. It's just like a weird misnomer. It would be like if I was like hating on gay people or whatever, and someone was like, "You're Islamophobic," and it's like, it's like what? I don't know. It's a weird cope that people have that like Jews are Semites. It's like, well, then everyone is. If Jews are Semites, then they're from Poland. They're from Czechoslovakia. There's a reason that Hitler did the Holocaust in Europe instead of like Lebanon or whatever. It's because that's not where they're from. So, anyway, funny point there, but what was it? What was I talking about? I don't know how we can't afford shit. Yeah, we like grew up in a world where it was like, motherfucker, it's no longer that thing of like go out and have fun when you're young and then go get a boring office job and live in a house in the suburbs, right? Getting a boring office job and living in a house in the suburbs is the fucking dream, dude. There are people, including me, to be fully honest, praying to Christ, praying to God, being like, dude, I don't even know if you're up there, but if you can get me a shitty fucking, job at some company or some governmental agency and give me just enough dough to get me into some cookie cutter house in some suburb of Columbus, Ohio, I will go to church every single day of the week. Like that's that is a very strong sentiment that exists within Gen Z of being like the boring office job in the house in the suburbs. That's the goal, dude. 2.5 kids and a white picket fence and a fucking job filling out Excel spreadsheets. That is the hope, man. That's no longer the fallback plan. The thing that people used to be like, yeah, if my career in art or whatever doesn't work out, if my career in writing poetry doesn't work out, I'll just go get a fucking job as a typist and then buy some house outside of Cincinnati or whatever. That's no longer a fallback plan. That is the main goal. The fallback plan is fentanyl. That's that's the fallback plan for Gen Z is like, fuck it. If I can't get a job in an office or like in an Amazon warehouse, I'm just gonna start doing fentanyl and just live in the woods or whatever. Right? That's the new fallback plan is just do drugs. That seriously is the fallback plan is become some sort of addict to some drug. So I think that's another major disconnect where the boomers and the Gen X and the millennials are like, go out and have fun while you're young. And it's like, what's the point of having fun while I'm young? Right? I go make memories while you're young. And it's like, yeah, it's gonna be a great time fucking reminiscing about those memories when I'm living in a 2-bedroom apartment that I share with 10 other people that are all doing DoorDash. Right? It doesn't make any sense to do that. It's not it they're we don't have the same fallback plan that they did, the same safety net of just being like, yeah, I'll just get a degree doing something and then, some office somewhere will be like, well, at least that guy has a bachelor's degree, so we'll just give him a job here. That's not that that no longer exists, All those jobs have now been taken by Indian people who work for 20 cents a year, right? That's the thing about it. It's either AI, it's either AI or the boys from Mumbai. The Bombay boys are coming over, and they're willing to do that job for 2 cents a fucking hour. So I think that's one of the main reasons that people ignore. It's like, why isn't Gen Z going out to these clubs and all that stuff? Some people are like, well, it's because they don't have money. Most people my age I know have a decent amount of cash saved up. But it's like, why would I spend that? Why would I go out for a few nights of fun when that could be like, cost me my house or whatever? Or like not cost you a house, but it just right? Like I don't know. I don't know how to properly express it. But it's like if I have fun now, like what's the cost of that going to be in the future? Right? Like I said, back in the day, back in, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even kind of the first part of the early 2000s, it was like you can go out and have fun and kind of like waste a bunch of money and end up in a little bit of debt and still have like a decent fallback plan. But that doesn't work when college is, $8,000 a semester. And that's being generous, man. Like the school I went to last year, I got tuition completely free because I'm part Native American, and the school I was going to used to be a boarding school. So they're like, as part of some treaty or whatever, they give Native American students free tuition. It was still $7,000 a semester, and that was with no tuition added. So I imagine with tuition, we're talking $12,000, $15,000, right? When that's the price of school, to get a degree, any fucking degree, when that's the price of it, it's like, man, it's not worth the fucking sacrifice. It's not worth going out and having fun. I need to save every fucking penny I have to even have a hope of, doing anything, of not living in an apartment with 90 other people, right? Not living in a fucking duplex that's surrounded by garbage, that's surrounded by fucking, you know, toxic waste from an AI data center somewhere. That's why that's the main reason why I think Gen Z's not having fun or whatever, or like going out and doing all these things is because it's like, man, what's the cost of that going to be in the future? right? Like if I don't work my ass off in school and get all A's and all that shit because I was out partying, no one's gonna hire me, right? Or no one's I'm not gonna have like that summa cum laude on my resume or whatever. I'm not gonna have that, magna cum laude or whatever it is. I'm not gonna have that on my resume to be able to get a decent job so I don't have to live in not a slum, right? It is America at the end of the day, right? We're talking about America here, so it's not that bad, but it's still like relative to the way other people had it. It's like, man, it's not worth it. Like that's the main thing that I think people are missing. They're like, "Oh, the they can't go out because they need to record everything on their phones." And it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? Like that argument, the argument that Gen Z isn't going out and having fun because they want to record everything on their phones. It's like, you can do that, right? That's not, there's no, you don't go to a club and they're like, all right, give me your phone. It's not fucking high school or whatever, right? Where they put it in a bag or whatever and they lock it up. You can still record all that shit. You can go to a bar or a concert or whatever and record yourself and record, the things around you. So it's not that. I think that's just like a lazy excuse. It's the classic excuse, it's the go-to. It's like, why were you late to work? And it's like, oh, car troubles. Like that's what that is. Like that's the excuse, or that's like the reasoning behind the deviant behavior of Gen Z, and not deviant in like a bad way, just deviant from the way other generations did things, right? It's not it's not bad that Gen Z isn't going out and going to these clubs. Maybe it is. Maybe for the collective psyche, it's bad that there's kind of there's not a lot of hope for the future and people aren't having as much fun as they used to. But but I don't think it's not like murder or whatever. It's not like an inherently bad socially deviant behavior. It's just different. It's just not the way other generations used to do things. And I think that's the key point that they're all missing. They're all like, "Oh, they don't have money." Most of us have a decent amount of money, right? Even if we're in debt, we still have, liquid money in the bank account. If we're in debt from college or having a car or buying a burrito from Chipotle, right? If we're in $10,000 of debt because we had to buy groceries, we still have a decent amount of liquid cash on us. So that's not what it is either. I think it's just a general lack of thinking fun is a necessity, right? Like I think that's the thing that previous generations thought. They were like, fun is a necessity. Whereas for us, it's like, dude, fun is a fucking luxury. If you can go out and have fun, if your dad's, the vice president of some company somewhere and you're guaranteed a job in the future, yeah, great. Go out and have that fucking fun. But for the vast majority of Gen Z, there's no security like that, right? It's not, the market's growing. Technically, I do think the stock market is still, despite everything, is still somehow increasing, but that's not a reflection of how well these companies are actually doing. They're just increasing their value. But that doesn't mean they're increasing their jobs or they're increasing their output or anything like that. They're not, just because Apple stock went up by 10%, that doesn't mean there's, 10% more jobs at Apple or whatever. Just because, Google is opening up all these data centers and is, making infinitely more money, that doesn't mean there's any more jobs. It's not like, the tech bubble or the dot-com bubble or whatever it was. It's not like those times, the good old days, dude. The good old days, like, and that's the funny thing about it is you have movies like Office Space and what's it, Fight Club and stuff, where it's like, oh, I work at this office job and I just have so much money and I don't know what to do with my life and I just keep working so hard. And I guess Office Space, oh fuck, is that the one where the people are getting fired? I can't exactly fucking remember, but it's the gist of it where it's like, this fucking office job I have is driving me insane. And it's like, dude, you you don't know how bad things are gonna get, dude. You don't know how many fucking offices were gonna be vacant within, 20 years or whatever it was. It's just, I think that's the disconnect that people aren't honing in on. They think it's technology or money or social media or whatever. When in reality, it's more of like a general feeling. It's deeper than that, right? It's not like if you took away everyone If it's not like if you took away Gen Z's phone, all of a sudden they'd be going out to, nightclubs and bars and shit and, drinking and having fun with each other. It still wouldn't be happening. Because at the end of the day, the economy's still shit. There's still no jobs, right? The only the only new jobs being created are like packing assistant at fucking, an Amazon warehouse somewhere, or, janitor at an AI data center. Those are the jobs that are being created right now. It's not like, work in an office and make PowerPoints and make, $90,000 a year or whatever. There's, I would be surprised if there's 10 of those jobs created every year, honestly. There's things like that don't exist anymore. Or they do, but they're not accessible to Gen Z, right? Because any job like that is being created is going to be given to someone with more experience, someone who's just older and just was able to get in, not on the ground floor, but was just able to get experience, was able to even get a job even closely related to something like that. Gen Z can't get that, man. Gen Z, you know, I keep talking about technology, so I'll use that as an example. They can't even get a fucking job mopping floors at Google anymore. They can't, right? And that's like one of the things that the boomers are like. They're like, go get a job, taking out trash, and then you'll slowly work your way up, if you just have the degree and the qualifications and stuff like that. Dude, there's not even jobs for taking out fucking trash anymore. Okay, like even the janitorial positions are like, how much experience do you have? Like what how long have you been a custodian for? And it's like, you haven't been a custodian for 20 years? Get the fuck out of here. Right? Like so it's just that. It's just like this major thing that they're not able to like fully experience, right? Like as much sympathy as the older generations may have, and I'm sure they have a lot. I'm sure members of the older generations do have a lot of sympathy or empathy. I don't know what the difference between those two words is. I do kind of use them interchangeably, but whatever the right word is, whether it's empathy or sympathy, they can have as much as that as they want, but it's like, man, just like the experience of it. Like, dude, I was born post 9/11, and then by the time I gained consciousness, supposedly the most stable market in America crashed, right? Real estate. That was supposed to be one of, if not the most stable market in America. I don't know, gold and petroleum are probably more stable, but like right below that should be real estate. But like the second I learned that I existed, the second I learned how to like use my hands properly, the third top five most stable market in America collapsed in on itself. Right? Like that's the world we gave into. It was like we were learning how to, spell our names, or we were learning how to count to 10, and everyone was like, the fucking houses, there's, there's no houses left anymore. All the houses burned down. the banks, the banks don't have any money left, and all the houses fucking exploded all at once. 10 million houses in America simultaneously literally blew up into splinters and dust. And the banks don't have any money left anymore because of that. And we were and we were like what sound does a cow make? It was We weren't learning about what sound a pig makes on the farm or whatever. We were learning what it sounded like when a fucking businessman jumped out of a window because his portfolio collapsed. Let me take a sip of water. That was our first waking moment as like human beings, who are able to comprehend the world around us. It was like 10,000 businessmen just killed themselves in Wall Street because the economy just collapsed, right? And then the aftermath of that, for us, it was like, oh fuck, we got Obama coming in. I remember, I do remember Obama a little bit, and it was like Obama was really, Obama was the millennial president. I get that he was part of, Gen X or whatever, or maybe a boomer. I don't. He was somewhere in there. I get that he was technically a part of that generation, but he truly was a millennial president. You know what I mean? He wore like business casual. You know what I mean? I feel like Obama was the first president to just wear like a white collared shirt with rolled up sleeves. You know, he was the millennial president. He was laid back, but he still gave a shit about his job and all that good stuff. And then Trump came in, and I would say Trump and Biden are both very Gen Z presidents, right? Where they're just like complete morons who don't know how anything how anything works at all. And they're just like doing whatever they can. They're just like, what the fuck is going on here? They're crab swirling out. And if you don't listen to Matt and Shane's secret podcast, the crab swirl is that meme of Mr. Krabs like freaking out. Just look up like Mr. Krabs freaking out. It's that it's that meme. And that's what Obama and Trump really are. Where Obama's just like or not Obama, Trump and Biden. Where Trump is just like, what the fuck? He's like giving out billion-dollar contracts to fucking anyone who, has blackmail against him. Just like, what do you need? Palantir, you need $1 trillion. Okay, who else needs $1 trillion? Meta, you need everyone's getting $1 trillion. And he's like, I do think that he thinks that's going to help. He's like, okay, who the fuck am I going to put a tariff on now? Does the Philippines need 120% tariff? Okay, give the Philippines 120% tariff. Hopefully that will make 10 new jobs in America and someone can buy a house. Right? That's what Trump is doing. And Biden was a different type of crab swirl. Biden was just his entire existence for his entire presidency was just pure crab swirls all the time, where he was just like, how do I get out of bed? What's this thing making noise next to me? Why does it have numbers on it? Oh, that's an alarm clock. Okay, how do I turn this thing off, man? That's what Trump and Biden are. They're just pure Gen Z crab swirls of like, what the fuck is going on? What? There's no programming jobs left in America? There's no houses? No one's built a house in 10 years? And all the jobs are either Indians or AI? What the fuck? So it's like we had Obama, the millennial president, the president of like, I'm fun, but like when it comes down to it, I can work hard and I can get things done. That's what Obama was. And then Trump came in with just like the boom shakalaka of just pure like emotionality and like demagoguery of just being like, I'm the best, everyone sucks, you should love me because I'm right about everything. And then Biden, I don't know if Biden did a similar play at all. I don't think Biden had a play. I think like the team behind him, like the team that was like controlling everything that he actually did, or like the policies and all that shit, I think those guys had a plan. But Biden was coming in with no game plan at all, which is just, that's kind of it reflects the dichotomy of Gen Z, where it's Trump is like the I'm gonna do these few things and then everything's gonna be perfect, and that exists in Gen Z of being like, oh, I'm gonna be a hustler, I'm gonna start, a drop shipping company or whatever it is, or I'm gonna, get a job in finance and get on Wall Street and then I'm gonna become rich, or whatever it is with that group of people, which I'm not a part of. I'm definitely more part of the Gen Z Biden crew, where it's just like, okay, I'm not exactly aware of the situation. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I know I have to do something. I don't know if there's gonna be a job for anyone by the time I graduate college, but fuck it, I've got to do something. I've got to get something done. And I am in a fortunate position. I understand that. I acknowledge that fact. I am in a very fortunate position. But at the end of the day, that position can only go so far. Like that's the thing about it. I do understand getting a pretty good deal here. Hey, I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad about it at all. I'm pretty happy about it. I'd say I'm pretty aware of the fortunate situation that I'm in, and I try to appreciate it as much as I can. But when someone comes out with an article being like, Gen Z's not having fun because of their phones, I'm like, man, you don't understand it at all. You don't comprehend the world that we live in and the world that we grew up in. It's like when we were like in high school or middle school or whatever, it was like, okay, the entire world's gonna shut down and everyone's gonna die. Like that's the thing that we came up on. And it's not like maybe it will be like the greatest generation. Like the greatest generation, they went through far worse shit. You know, they had the Great Depression, and then immediately following that, they had World War II. They went through a lot of shit, man. They went through way worse shit. But at the end of that fucking crumbling tunnel, there was still that light. There was still that light of the military industrial complex and like factory jobs and manufacturing and all that stuff. For us, it's like I don't know if there is an untapped market like that left, you know? Like at the end of World War II, there was still that untapped market in the United States of America, at least, of we need, people to do these manufacturing jobs and we need people to, work for these military tech companies and all that stuff. There was still that light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't think that Gen Z has that as much. We definitely didn't have it as bad as them. I don't think anyone had it as bad as the greatest generation. And I think I'm talking about I think I'm saying the right name here, the greatest generation. I'll look it up real quick. But in terms of like America, those boys probably had it the worst in the modern era. You know, no one had it like that. No one had a complete economic collapse followed immediately by the largest war that ever was. Right? No one had it as bad as that. But I do think that at the end of it all, they still had that infinite, growth, that America underwent from like the 60s, not even the 60s, like the 50s until the 80s or 90s, somewhere around there. They had that. They had there's suburbs to be built, there's dog food to be made, there's cars to be made, there's industries to be created. They still had that. And I don't think Gen Z really has an equivalent like that at all. Like even the millennials kind of had that with tech. They still had like tech is, you know, it didn't pan out for them, obviously. The whole tech thing really didn't pan out for the millennials at all. And it didn't pan out for anyone. There's a lot of Gen X and a few boomers that are in the tech industry, and it really didn't pan out well for them. But they still had that hope of being like there's a major industry out there that has infinite growth potential that we can tap into and we can take advantage of and make a whole lot of money off of. Those generations had that thing. Gen Z doesn't. It's whatever's out there is by the time I graduate college, by the time I'm 30, it's probably going to be the exact same scenario. Whereas with these other generations, even if it didn't come to fruition, there was still that hope of, I don't know, maybe Google's going to have, a million jobs and everyone can get a fucking job at Google and we can all be happy. There's nothing like that for Gen Z. There's nothing even close to that. There's no, right, like tech. That shit's all getting taken over by AI and Indians that are being imported to work for 20 grand a year. Right? That's who that industry is being taken over by. Manufacturing doesn't exist. There's no there's a little bit of manufacturing left in this country. I say company when I mean country a lot. I don't know. Maybe there's a Freudian slip in there. Maybe I'm like conflating the idea of the American capitalistic system like infiltrating the government and stuff like that. I don't know. I guess I'm just deep. I guess I'm just really deep like that and no one understands me. No, I'm just retarded and I say company instead of country sometimes, and also vice versa. But and maybe the manufacturing will come back to this country, and I pray to God it does. I pray that I'm completely wrong about everything, and I hope I am. I really hope I have to fucking eat crow in the future and have egg on my face or whatever the fucking term is for that shit. I really hope that happens to me. I pray. I pray that I'm wrong. I really do hope that I'm wrong, and maybe I am. Maybe I maybe I also don't understand the world around me as it exists. But from my perspective, and I would say the perspective of most people in Gen Z, there's an understanding, right? Even if it's not spoken out loud, that the period of infinite growth is over. It's not there's no untapped markets left, right? There's no whether it's manufacturing or tech or construction or whatever it is, there's nothing like that that exists for us. Maybe as a whole, technology, manufacturing, construction, maybe all of those things can come together to kind of be a single market that has a lot of growth potential, maybe. But I think at the end of the day, it's hard to identify, any single thing that's like that. I think it's not like tech where it was like, all right, there's going to be, everyone's going to have computers in the next few years, and we need to make all these programs that everyone can use, and we need to make like apps, fucking apps that everyone can use. That was kind of the millennials equivalent of our like hustler culture, right? Like millennials that kind of had no hope, they were like, fuck it, I'll just make an app, whereas Gen Z that has no hope, they'll be like, all right, I'm just going to like drop ship shit from Alibaba. So yeah, there's no untapped markets. There's no right. It's not like the government's gonna. If the government can get any bigger, I don't think it's gonna create any new jobs, because any new jobs that can be created by the government are probably gonna be done by AI. To be fully honest, um, so it's just shit like that, man. It's just like the general, and I don't want to say hopelessness, right? I think being hopeless is kind of like it's just a useless mentality to have, but it is in the back of your mind. As for most people that live in America today, there's a sense of hopelessness of it being like, fuck it, there's not going to be any jobs left. There's not, no new jobs are going to be created. No new affordable houses are going to, I'm never going to be able to buy a house. Shit like that. It's kind of the general feeling that I think a lot of people in this country have, but I think it's really, distilled in Gen Z, where these other generations kind of grew up having that hope of being like, there's going to be some growth here, man. The technology, the manufacturing, whatever it is, that's going to keep on growing, and people are going to be able to get jobs, and those jobs are going to pay well enough for them to buy houses and raise families and stuff like that. Whereas Gen Z, man, it was like the fucking housing market crash in 2008, the fucking the COVID pandemic, right? We had a few years of peace in there. We had Obama, and then we had Trump right afterwards. So there was a few, I'd say from like 2008 to 2016. So what is that? 8 years. There was 8 years of hope, uh, in the collective psyche of Gen Z. And I don't mean to sound, unappreciative or whatever. I appreciate, the things that my parents and grandparents and, the people that came before me did. And I thank them for that, because I do live in a better world than a lot of them. And and I do think that's part of the thing that you can blame on those goddamn phones, where it's just like, it, it's so easy to be like, to just get into an algorithm or whatever of just being fed negativity and stuff like that. When in reality, it could be a whole lot fucking worse. It really could be worse. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying that the criticism or the thoughts that I expressed about why Gen Z doesn't have any fun, I'm not saying those aren't valid, but I am saying that those damn phones, there is a little bit of validity to that expression, being like, it's those goddamn phones. There is a little bit of truth to that, a fair amount of truth, I'd say, even being like, it's the phones that are feeding them the negativity. Both of those things can be true at the same time. It can be that things are just kind of bleak as a whole, but that also looking at your phone and just wallowing in how bad it is isn't going to help either. Right? Both of those things can be true at the same time. So it is those damn phones, but it is also a bleak situation. Not as bleak as a lot of situations have been in the past. There's been even in this country, there's been far worse situations. We've had the War of 1812, the Civil War. We've had all this shit. We've had the Spanish flu. We've had this stuff in the past before, it's kind of what makes me hopeful of, like, we had a worse depression. People will say that this depression is worse because of like the buying power and all that shit, but it's still like, there's still going to be food, and you're still not going to die of like having hookworms or whatever and shit like that, right? People will say that the other depression is not as bad as this one, but it's also like, man, those people lived in such a shitty fucking world, right? Like, at the end of the day, there's still going to be the things that make this time that we live in good, right? There's still going to be the technology and the access to, medical shit and stuff like that. Hopefully. I'm saying it. Maybe I'm jinxing us, dude. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm jinxing us. Hey, dude, everyone knock on fucking wood now. If you're listening to this, go find a piece of wood. I don't know, maybe you have to get your dick hard real quick and make that your wood and knock on it real quick. Wherever you are, knock on that shit. Hopefully, hopefully I'm not jinxing us right here by being like, yeah, the hospitals and shit and the fucking, the technology, and we're always going to be fed and, have vaccines and have, access to life-saving medical intervention. Hopefully I'm right about that. Hopefully we will have all those things in the future, and I'm right about that one at least. Hopefully. That's like the one thing I want to be right about from what I've said in this episode of the things that make our life good and easy now will continue to persist into the future. I really hope they do. I really hope, even if the situation isn't great, even if, like I said, you are sharing an apartment with 10 other people and you all work for DoorDash, hopefully there still will be an ambulance to take you to the hospital if you snap your leg. Hopefully those things will still exist. Hopefully there still will be, air conditioning and a massive excess of food. Hopefully that's still around. That's the one thing that, the one, I guess, prediction, or I don't know, foresight or whatever. I don't know what the proper term is, but whatever it is, I hope that's the one thing that I'm right about. I really, that's because that's like the basis of it all. Because you can live a pretty bleak life, right, in terms of economics, of being like, fuck, I work a job that really doesn't pay me anything, and I also hate it, and I live in a pretty shitty situation, but but at least I can, not die of rubella or whatever, right? Because that's like the basis of it. Any psychology fans out there, look up. We're gonna go over Maslow's hierarchy of needs because I'm pretty sure all the shit that I talked about, that's part of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and like that's, I think, as bad as things might get, we're gonna have the bottom two pieces of that pyramid, and I'll go over the pyramid real quick. So at the bottom you have physiological needs, which is just like air, water, food, and shelter, and then you have safety, which is like personal security, no violence, crime, war, stuff like that. But as we get up the pyramid, I think that's where like the drop off for Gen Z begins. I think for most of our lives we'll have our physiological needs met, and we'll have, for the most part, our safety needs met. But I think love and belonging, that's the next one on the pyramid, and that's family, friendship, community, romantic relationships, group memberships, affection and intimacy. Affection and intimacy, that's already in a pretty big decline. Family, people aren't really having kids like that. Friendship, once again, it kind of is those damn phones of people just, they don't want to like risk having an awkward interaction, so instead they'll just go on their phones, whereas the previous generations didn't have that out. So yeah, this is where the drop off begins. And then you have esteem, which is self-respect, confidence, respect from others, reputation and recognition and achievement. And I feel like that's one of the things that's collapsing within Gen Z, where it's like people don't give a shit really about how good of a person you are. It's weird because there is like a certain purity culture that exists within Gen Z, of like the second anyone steps out of line, that person is immediately attacked, right? And that exists. People think of it as a left wing thing. It exists on both the left and the right, right? Where it's like, if you're a right wing person and you're like, I think gay people should, you know, they should be allowed to exist and get married, you will get decimated. And then the left wing equivalent of that is being like, I don't think. Okay. All right. I am thinking about how funny it is that in the middle of me bitching about how awful my life is or how awful it's gonna be, my daddy knocked on the door and he was like, "All right, we have chicken legs for you. There's dinner ready, a big old warm home cooked meal for you." But hey, that does relate back to my Maslow's hierarchy of needs type situation that we got going on here, where it's like, yes, I do think that the bottom two steps of the pyramid, safety needs and physiological needs, are, I feel like Gen Z is always going to have those two met. As bad as things might get, I think, America, if there's one thing we can depend on this country to do, it's give us a fuck ton of food. Right? There's one thing we can always depend on America to do. and also, keep us safe from outside invaders, at least an army. We do got some invaders here. We do got a few Zims. We got a few invader Zims pulling up, but I think in terms of like war, I think America's pretty safe. Um, and safety needs, I was thinking about that while we were on break. You know what I mean? While I was spinning a few tunes, I've kind of always wanted to do like a radio show. So it's like when I'm sick and tired of talking, I can just play a couple tunes real quick. I don't know. Uh, no one's listening to radio anymore, but also no one's listening to this. So, tomato, tomato. But I was thinking about the whole safety needs thing. And one of the ones on there is crime. And I was like, I do think there's going to be an uptick in crime in the next few years, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying about like the whole purity culture thing, where it's like the left has this purity culture of, hey, I don't think we should, give hormones to like 4-year-olds, and then everyone like crucifies them. So I do think we have that certain purity culture, but I also think we have a thing of like we don't we don't view certain crimes like the way other generations did. I know I certainly don't, where it's like shoplifting. People are like, "Oh, shoplifting, that's why everything's behind glass at Target." And it's like that's you're blaming the wrong thing here. The reason everything's behind glass at Target is because everything costs 10 times more than it should cost, right? And so that's why I feel like our generation, not maybe as a whole, but substantially doesn't view shoplifting really as a crime, or really not just shoplifting, like theft. Corporate theft to us is not a crime. There's nothing morally incorrect about that. It's maybe socially deviant, right? Not a lot of people shoplift. I don't shoplift. Not a lot of people are, embezzling money from their companies and shit like that. But I think morally, we don't have the same view of corporations that the millennials. I don't think they have like the boomer level of view, but I still think they're like, oh, shoplifting is bad. Whereas we're like, dude, I'm sorry, a candy bar is $8. I'm gonna put that in my fucking pocket and walk out. Dude, batteries, like a 10 pack of AAA's is close to $20. I'm gonna put that shit in my pocket and walk right the fuck out. What are you talking about, dude? Get my ass for grand larceny. Build up a case against me for 20 years. Prison is going to be the exact same as the fucking apartment that I'm living in. I don't give a shit if you want to fucking, build a case against me because I stole AAA batteries for 20 years straight. Suck my dick. I don't give a fuck. Throw me in jail. So I think that crime maybe will increase, but I don't think the type of, violent fear for your life type of crime will increase. I think that'll probably stay where it is. Maybe get a little bit higher, maybe get a little bit lower, but yeah, I don't think it'll increase. And I was talking about esteem, right? The self-respect, the respect from others. I just don't think that exists as much with Gen Z and really in the world as a whole now, right? It's the most powerful people in this country are not respected by the vast majority of people. Donald Trump, even people on the right, like I'm a pretty conservative dude. I don't respect Donald Trump fucking at all. I do think he represents Gen Z in a lot of ways, but I don't respect him. Jeff Bezos, very powerful individual. I don't respect him. But like Obama, I don't like I knowing what I know now, I don't respect him, but just like the average person, I feel like respects Obama a pretty decent amount. I know some things about Obama that are unsavory, and not even the trans shit, not even Michelle Obama being trans. That really wouldn't change my view of Obama at all. But so I think the whole esteem thing is kind of out the door, and then self-actualization. And the way the pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy of needs works is you need the levels below it to be fulfilled in order to reach the level above it, right? So you can't feel safe if your physiological needs are not met, and you can't feel actualization if your esteem needs are not met. So that's how that pyramid works. So it's we got the bottom two, but the top three, love and belonging, esteem, right? The reason Gen Z will never have that respect, according to Maslow, if you believe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I personally do, if you believe in this system, we will never reach the level of having our esteem needs met because a lot of us won't reach the level of having our love and belonging needs met, right? there's not a lot of community going on. All the community's online, right? So it is that damn phone. Going back to it, it is that goddamn phone. So, um, yeah, I think that that just relates heavily to society as a whole, but I think it's a good explanation as to the generational gap between Gen Z and the previous generations, and I guess Gen Alpha and the previous generations. But Gen Alpha, those fucking people, those, I guess kids, they're not, I guess kids are people, but when you say those fucking people, usually you're talking about adults. Those fucking kids, they're so out of it, they might skip all of these fucking things and reach the fucking self actualization at the top of the pyramid. I I don't know what's going on with those guys. I think those guys are just we're just frying their brains nice and good before they reach adulthood so that they don't have to experience these types of things. I think that's I think that's what we're doing with fucking, Gen Alpha. We're like, all right, future ain't looking too bright. Let's just fry your brains right now. That way you'll never be mad or angry about about anything. Whereas Gen Z, a, f- a lot of us got our brains fried pretty early, with the phones and the tablets and the overstimulation and all that bullshit. But like me personally, I made it to like 17, like 16, 17 before my brain began to fry from the technology. Now, my brain did begin to fry before that because of the pandemic. Dude, like I was a pandemic. My dad's a pandemic guy. Like we got locked the fuck down there and that shit. I didn't know how to talk to people when I got back. And I think that once again going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that kind of goes back to the love and belonging thing where it's like I think it's hard for Gen Z to create this sense of community, partly because of that goddamn phone. But I think the other part is our ability to socialize and our understanding of like just social interactions and like the construct of sociality was I think it was kind of fried by the pandemic. Just normal interactions didn't happen for like a year. And that's insane. For barely any normal interactions to occur. Like other generations had their thing, right? Going back to the greatest generation during the Great Depression and World War II, there was not a lot of there was not a whole ton of normal interaction going on. Everyone's mind was kind of revolving around either where the fuck is my next meal going to come from or this fucking war is killing hundreds of thousands of young American men, right? That's so they had those two things too, but like I said, there was that light for them at the end of the tunnel. I don't know if they saw it or not. Uh and maybe, history repeats itself. Maybe we're in kind of like this bleak situation now, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel that our eyes just aren't attuned to yet. We just can't. There's light there, but we can't perceive it quite yet. So hopefully that's true. But yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that's a good way of explaining the generational gap between Gen Z and just most of the other previous generations. I think that's a good explanation of just like we do have our needs met. We do have our basic needs met, but we're never going to be able to reach the same level that the other generations met. I think that's the thing that I'm really getting at here that I don't think the other generations understand. Where it's like, yeah, man, I get it. We have food and we have, relative safety compared to most of the other world. But compared to the way you guys had it, the way you guys talk and the advice you gave us growing up, it just doesn't apply at all now. It doesn't. It's, and I think other people, like a millennial might think that, or like a Gen Xer might think that, but it's not the same. And what I mean by that is like, so the boomers and stuff were like, go if life doesn't work out, go get a job, at a factory or whatever, or some shit like that. And the reason that Gen X is like, well, we're kind of in the same boat as Gen Z is because there weren't any factories left by the time Gen X really got to working. But the same logic still applies, where it was like there were still these kind of shitty jobs that you could get and that could give you a pretty, decent life. Not the greatest life, not a perfect life by any means, but it could still give you like a pretty decent life, to fall back on these shitty jobs. Gen Z doesn't have that. We don't have, a factory job or a job as like a typist or a paralegal or whatever that we can, go and fall back on and like get a shitty house instead of like a kind of nice house. That doesn't exist for us, right? There's no such thing as a starter home in this economy. Certain aspects of our economy are beginning to improve, right? Like cars, the, the economy around cars, like the car bubble, when all those motherfuckers were raking in cash, that's starting to slow down a little bit, and car prices are starting to reach a more reasonable level. And but the real estate market is fundamentally different in the sense that cars aren't an asset the same way real estate is, right? Like if BlackRock bought, 100,000, fucking Toyota 4Runners or whatever, those are going to depreciate in value over time, right? And the real estate that BlackRock is buying up, that might also depreciate over time, but at the end of the day, they still have, control over all that land and shit like that and all those houses and, all that shit. So I feel like that's the situation for Gen Z. It probably isn't going to get any better just in terms of like the collective psyche until the housing market starts to improve, right? And obviously, below that, the thing that really needs to improve is the job market. And like I said, I don't think there's that same hope there that existed in the previous generations. There's not there's not that market that has infinite growth potential like, manufacturing and real estate did in the 50s, and like tech believe it they believed that tech had infinite growth potential in like the 90s, early 2000s, 2010s and stuff like that. That doesn't really exist for Gen Z. So I think that's like the main thing that makes it so bleak for us is like there's nowhere left for the economy to go. There's the housing market doesn't seem like it could improve at all, right? Uh, it doesn't seem like there will ever be another market that's like good for buyers and like not as good for these real estate investment companies and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's just like a generational divide thing where they're blaming it on the wrong things, right? They're blaming the bleakness and the nihilistic outlook of Gen Z kind of on the wrong things. Not everyone is like Tim Dillon. I think Tim Dillon gets it more than these fucking people that are writing articles and shit like that. Other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot of other people that at least I've personally heard talk about this issue that understand it in the same way Tim Dillon does. Other people view it as like just like one individual thing, right? Like I was talking about those goddamn phones, or some people think it's the job market, or some people think it's the real estate market. It's all of it. All of it is not. It's not. It doesn't exist in a way to benefit the majority anymore. None of these markets exist in that way. And you could argue that they never really did, but at least they did benefit those people, right? Like the real estate market, that doesn't benefit Gen Z at all anymore. It doesn't. That's not and I don't think it was ever the intentions of these real estate developers to benefit the people that were buying their houses or renting their houses, but at the end of the day, it did benefit people. It, right? The real estate market though, it does not benefit us in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't. There's nothing positive about it for us. It's not like there's nothing there's just nothing good about it for Gen Z and for a lot of other groups. But like I said, these other groups, they didn't grow up in that world, right? They weren't born basically into a world where it was like you're shit out of luck, kid. They live in that world now. They live in the world of fuck it, nothing's ever going to work out for you. They live in that world now, but they weren't born into that world. They didn't spend their entire adolescence in that world. They didn't spend their early adult years in that world. They lived in a world where it was like, hey man, kind of world's your oyster type situation. Whereas Gen Z, it's not, man. Gen Z is really, and I keep going back to the greatest generation thing because I think it's a good comparison. The greatest generation is the greatest generation because they had that mentality of like, fucking put your head down and get to goddamn work. That's why that's why they were so successful and so good at what they did. But Gen Z just doesn't have that. There's no, I put my head down and work. I'm in the same situation I was 10 years ago, right? Let's say I'm, 25. I graduated college a few years ago. I put my head down and work until I'm 35. I'm in the same goddamn position. That's that's the major difference that I don't think people understand. We're not going to be able, hopefully I'm wrong about this, but I don't think we'll be able to advance in the world the same way previous generations were able to advance in the world. Like I said, I pray to God I'm wrong. Every day I wake up and I say, hopefully I'm just being a big, gigantic fucking pussy about this shit. I really do. It's what I hope, but I don't think, I just don't think that's the truth at all. I don't see any market, rising out of the dirt and having infinite growth potential. I don't see, you know, any politician having the gall to tell BlackRock to back the fuck off and start selling their real estate and stuff like that. I don't see that ever happening. And that's and that just goes back to why Gen Z isn't having fucking fun. We're not having fun kind of because there's no hope. That's what it boils down to. That is why we're not having fun. We're not having fun in the hopes that us not having fun now will maybe just fucking by the grace of God benefit us in the future. It probably won't. That's the truth. It probably won't benefit me to, not drink and go out with my friends and fucking, hit clubs and party and do whatever. Right? It probably won't benefit me to not do any of that stuff. It won't benefit me to do it, right? I think that's the other thing is Gen Z doesn't, we don't hold value in that stuff. A lot of people maybe do, but they don't actually go out and do it. I think that's the other thing is that like these other generations, it held a lot of value for them and they did it. I think Gen Z does value social interaction and going out and having a good time, but we just don't do it, right? Because there doesn't seem to be any benefit to it, right? It's like go out and have fun and just party when you're young and then work hard when you're older. But it's like I think I need to work hard now. I think that's the ethos that Gen Z has going on, right? It's a bit of nihilism, but it's also a bit of optimism in the sense that we're kind of like if we work hard, if we just don't do any of the partying and shit, maybe it'll work out for us. If we fucking, get our asses in school, work our asses off, apply to 1,000 internships, maybe it'll work out for us. So that's the reason Gen Z is not having fun. It's it's nihilism and optimism at the same time. It's nihilism in the sense that we don't want to go out and have fun because it's like, what's the point of it all, right? That's what nihilism is if you really boil it down into like a single phrase. It's like, what's the point of it all? It's nihilism, but it's also optimism that maybe if we don't kind of make the mistakes that we saw the millennials make, things can work out for us better. So it's just, yeah, is what it is, man. Could be worse, could be better, could be significantly better. It should be better. Um, yeah, I don't know. People are saying when the boomers die, everything's gonna get better. I think they're gonna get a whole lot worse. I don't see as much of a divide between Gen X and the boomers as other people do. You know, I think I come from a good family, and I'm very happy about that. I think I do have a pretty good family that, you know, I do have boomer relatives, but they don't have that boomer mentality of like me, me, me. My grandpa's a very giving man. I love him, great guy. And my parents, they don't have that mentality either of, me, me, me that a lot of other Gen X people do. But I'm just one person, man. At the end of the day, I'm just one person and I only have one family. If every family was like mine, not saying things would be perfect, but I think they'd be better. If every boomer was as generous with their spoils of war that my grandpa was, I think we would be in a whole lot of a better situation. I think if they were less self-centered, we'd be in a better situation, but they're not. They're just not. So you kind of have to accept the reality of the situation, put your head down, and fucking hope that things get better. That's why Gen Z is not having fun. Because at the end of the day, we have hope that things can get better. And the only way that we know to make things get better is by saying, fuck having fun now. Maybe, just maybe, if I don't have any fun for my entire youth and I just work my ass off, I can live a life of not even wealth or greatness, but just of peace. So I think that's my explanation. But also, what the fuck do I know? I don't know anything. I don't. I think just because I'm Gen Z, that doesn't mean I know more than anyone else, but it's what I believe. So, but that's all I've got for this episode, guys. Dude, back to the optimism, that Gen Z optimism, dude. That fucking indomitable human spirit, dude. I hope you have a good day, a good week, a good year, a good life. I hope fucking everything works out for you, dude. Fuck the fun. Work now. Maybe things will get better. Don't be a nihilist pussy. Don't be like fucking me that has to go on a podcast and bitch about everything. Fucking work, dude. You got this, bro. You fucking got this. Let's go. Let's go, Brandon. Fucking Trump, Biden, whoever you fucking love. Fucking work hard. All right. I'm not going to work hard. I'm a lazy pussy, but yeah. Hope you have a good day, week of your life. Peace.